Hello and welcome to your weekend mini nerve. I am your host, Maureen Callahan. And to wrap up the theme of this week, today is All Souls Day. So we figured, why don't we tackle a smaller topic? Just what happens when we die? What happens to the soul? What becomes of human consciousness? You know, just the sole question that by which I mean the only question that has really consumed humanity since the dawn of time. Now we are going to be speaking to an expert in this matter. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Long. He is a practicing oncologist in Kentucky. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Evidence of the Afterlife, The Science of Near-Death Experiences. He's also a researcher who has compiled data from over 5,000 near-death experience cases. He founded the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation in 1998, which maintains one of the largest databases of NDE accounts in the world. Dr. Long, we are so happy to welcome you to our mini nerve.
It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to what we talk about today.
Dr. Long, what brought you, I would imagine your work as an oncologist, I mean, you're dealing with people who are, upon the moment of their diagnosis, facing their own mortality. What is it that brought you to this as a field of research now for decades?
Sure. Great question. I was actually in my residency training program in my medical specialty of radiation oncology decades ago, flipping through one of the bound medical journals we had, and quite by accident found an article that had in the title near-death experience. And I'd never heard of it before. Nothing in my medical training had prepared me for that. I thought you're either dead or alive, and what's this near-death experience stuff? But here in the article, it was a description of a cardiologist, a heart doctor whose patients he studied that had near-death experiences described consciousness over their body. They could see and hear ongoing earthly events. Even while bodily, they were down there, coded, heart stopped, literally in a coma. So I was fascinated and thought to myself, why aren't more people researching this? And if this changes, if this is real, FNDE is for real, and I come to find that with the best evidence I can get, then that changes my view of the universe. So boom, that began my greater than 25-year journey of exploration.
So I was very interested to see how far back in recorded human history near-death experiences have been memorialized. The literature says that as early as humans were able to draw on caves, there were depictions of souls leaving bodies. The earliest written account comes from the myth, I believe, of E.R. This was Socrates. Oh, no, sorry, this was Plato. And in this myth, a warrior is on the funeral pyre. He has been dead for days, and he comes back to life, and he recounts having seen all of the things that we would now consider to be hallmarks of a near-death experience: a bright light, an overwhelming feeling of love, a sense of timelessness. What do you say to those who believe that all of these sort of uniform accounts are actually the body's way of shutting down, the brain's way of easing the human into death, into nothingness?
Sure. The skeptical arguments are technically hypotheses when they hypothesize that physical brain function is accounting for what is observed, what actually happens in near-death experiences. But physical brain function can't even come close to explaining what we observe. In near-death experiences, literally at this point by the thousands, we have people that have a near-death experience, consciousness goes above their body, they can see and hear ongoing earthly events while their physical body and their brain is literally shut down. It's unconscious or may even be clinically dead. That's medically inexplicable. Typical near-death experiences by the scores have been reported while you're under general anesthesia and your heart stops. In that circumstance, it should be doubly impossible to have any kind of remembrance, and yet people do. Typical
Why
near-death
is that? Because the anesthesia What does
Yeah,
the
yeah.
anesthesia do that means that there's zero brain function, basically?
Typical during especially longer, deeper surgeries while under general anesthesia. That's why we have to medically ventilate people. I mean, we're sitting here with a bag literally breathing for them, or they're on a mechanical ventilation device, a ventilator. Reason for that is the anesthesia has their physical brain shut down literally to the brainstem level, so they can't even breathe on their own, and that's why they require mechanical ventilation. We have scores of near-death experiences occurring where their heart stops at that time due to a variety of causes. They have typical near-death experiences, including so often describing that out-of-body experience and observation of the operating room personnel's frantic efforts to bring them back to the life. There's absolutely no way physical brain function can explain that. And those are just two of the multiple lines of evidence all converging on the reality of near-death experience.
Those cases in which the patient who has died on the table and then is revived and says, I heard you, doctor, say X, Y, and Z. They can recount verbatim. Doctor,
Absolutely.
have you ever been under general anesthesia?
Yeah, I sure have several times.
What was the experience like for you? Because the first time I ever went under general anesthesia, I emerged profoundly disturbed for the exact reason you're talking about, which is you are suddenly plunged into there's no brain function whatsoever. When you sleep, we dream, whether you remember it or not, we dream every night. There's an awareness that the body and the brain are still at work. When I came out of general anesthesia for the first time, I thought I had never experienced anything like it. And yeah, it left me disturbed. How did it feel for you? I mean, you're a man of medicine, so it might have been quite different.
Yeah, of course, in my anesthesia training back in medical school, I was involved with general anesthesia with lots of people, and for the great majority, I'm sorry you came through and were disturbed afterwards. The good news is when we administer general anesthesia, generally it's literally a conscious blank slate. Boom, you go to sleep. Classically, anesthesiologist says start at 100 and count down. You get down to about 95, 92, and then boom, the medicines hit, and there's no conscious awareness at all until you usually relatively quickly come back into consciousness and awareness. But that time while they were doing surgery, all the time that you were under general anesthesia, blank slate, I can understand if that was your first time, that would be a little disconcerting. But I think for most people, it's like, wow, I'm glad I did not remember anything during that period when they were doing their cutting, when they were doing the surgical procedure. But that's typical. That's how effective general anesthesia is.
Yeah, I think what it is it absents human consciousness.
Mhm.
And what
Oh,
are we without our consciousness?
oh, that's interesting. I get your feelings now. That'd be to you like a brief period of death
Yes,
where you were.
absolutely.
So there you go. So there was nothing, all your life you have a stream of consciousness, often even propagating into being asleep, but not not under general anesthesia. Boom, there's nothing. And you go to sleep at a very discrete time. You know you've woken up later. You know, or are told that there was could be anywhere from hours or minutes that you were under, and and it's a blank slate. So yeah, I could see where that would be disconcerting, but that's general anesthesia's goal is to protect you from the discomfort or the issues going around that surgical procedure, and it's quite good at that.
Now, doctor, how do you explain the difference in reports from those who have said they believe they have had such an experience where they have left the earthly plane, they have encountered the light, but they see the deity of their earthly religion? So Christians tend to report seeing Jesus Christ. Buddhists, sort of a non-theistic religion, their accounts differ if they exist at all. They believe in reincarnation upon death. What accounts for the ways in which those beings manifest?
Yeah, that's a good question. By the way, just this year, I presented at a meeting the largest cross-cultural study of near-death experience ever reported, including about 60 near-death experiences from non-Western countries. So
16
I've
or
actually,
60? Sorry, I missed you there.
that's 60, 60.
60,
So
okay.
I actually have had more of a detailed look at these type of non-Western experiences occurring in non-Judeo-Christian cultures than anybody else ever had. It's a little bit more complex than that. I mean, think a lot of what you quote there is prior NDE researchers speculating that, of course, you're going to be seeing beings specifically to your religion. Uh, in the non-Western religions, for reasons I'm not 100% clear on, they're significantly less likely to encounter religions or deities specific to their religion, at least the earthly prophets, or if you will. The Christians about around 10% of the 7 to 10% of the time will encounter Jesus.
Mhm.
Seems to be a lower percentage in the non-Christian religions. But that doesn't really surprise me. Yes, they do indeed. We do have reports of those that if they're Muslim, they'll encounter imams or they'll encounter some beings that are specific to what they encounter in their earthly life. Again, not a surprise to me because don't forget in the life review or when you review part or all of your prior life during a near-death experience, you're going to encounter that part that was part of your memory. The deceased loved ones you encounter are the ones that you knew. They're not someone else's deceased loved ones. Buildings and landscapes are going to be more familiar to you than if they were some landscapes or buildings from some totally different culture. So I'm not terrifically surprised that we see that. That gets into a little bit of a complex issue. For example, I co-authored a scholarly paper with a Muslim researcher and asked him point blank, why aren't there more Muslims reporting encounters with Muhammad? And I think his answer was very telling. He said that in Islam, saying that you encountered Muhammad would be very frowned upon. And so at least from my perspective, obviously it's going to be way underreported. So again, it's difficult to find cross-cultural non-Western near-death experiences, and there may be some cultural barriers from them reporting exactly what deities they encountered.
Well, this is fascinating because in Islam, it is heretical for there to be any depictions of Muhammad. Right? Adherents have no sense of what Muhammad would look like. He's not depicted in works of great art, in sculpture, anything. And so that's sort of where I get stuck. You know, if it were if there were nothing specific to any earthly religion, any god specific to said religion, a deity, and it was sort of this blanket experience that I think would leave a little bit more room than than these differing accounts. What would you say to that?
Yeah, okay, I would have to say that's my formal study was about 60 non-Western near-death experiences and over 900 near-death experiences shared from Western countries. So let's talk about the major findings. In that study, we had a number of survey questions that were asking specifically about that deeper spiritual content. We asked directly, did you encounter God? Do you encounter awareness of love? Did you encounter awareness of what near-death experiencers so often say that there's a mystical, unearthly unity or connection, or more often described as a oneness? In those key spiritual questions that dig deeper into sort of the global picture of religion, there was no statistical difference between the two groups. So as far as looking at what they encountered, they seemed to encounter that what in English we would call God, but near-death experiencers so often say that's a human word and can't begin to describe that overwhelming being sense presence of light, love, compassion, knowledge beyond any earthly description. Same thing with a concept that's typically not common in Judeo-Christian religious teachings, that concept of unity and oneness. About half, actually a little over half in my survey, said that they did during their near-death experience encounter information that there really was that mystical unity, oneness in the afterlife. And again, that's just simply radically different from what's conventionally taught, certainly in conventional Western countries. So again, digging into the deeper spiritual questions, we're seeing that very remarkable consistency in what happens during a near-death experience, even in the deeper spiritual content, no matter where on the planet the near-death experience occurs or what their prior religious belief or non-belief was.
There are a couple of things that seem across the board testimonials from those who say they've been to the other side and have come back. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you, I read quite a while ago. It was another expert in this field who said what we really should be calling these are death experiences. That these people all have died. They have all died. Like near death makes you think you were kind of on the brink. You know, you were alive, you were conscious, there was brain activity. But we're really talking about people who coded, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And that's for my study group, you had to be so physically compromised at the time of your experience that you were unconscious or clinically dead, defining a near-death experience. In other words, so physically compromised that if you didn't recover, you would be permanently, irreversibly dead. So, yes, these people really have an extremely close brush with death. And to say especially for those that where their heart stopped, they coded, had or respiratory arrest, stop breathing, for these people, they are literally by our clinical measures dead.
Mhm.
So to say it's a near-death experience, I agree with you. That's a little bit of a misnomer. Ask anybody who had a near-death experience as a result of their heart stopping, and they'll be very clear. It wasn't that I nearly physically bodily died. I died, and that's well documented.
Today's show is brought to you by Oxford Natural, home of the all-natural Optimum Day and Optimum Night supplements. Are you trying to lose weight after having a baby, prepping for your wedding, or just ready to feel like yourself again? Thousands of men and women across the US and UK are already doing it with Oxford Natural. Optimum Day powers you with steady energy. It crushes cravings and it keeps your metabolism firing all day. Optimum Night helps you relax, sleep deeply, recover, and keep burning fat while you rest. Scan the QR code or click the link. Grab 70% off your first order with code NERVE. That's practically free. No gimmicks, no needles, just results. Oxford Natural. Let's get to work. What I find really compelling about the testimonials of those who've come back, and anybody, we'll direct you guys to the website that you run, Dr. Long, because it's really fascinating, these testimonials. One thing they all say is I felt such a degree of love and acceptance that there not even a mother's love on earth could compare. Number two, I did not want to come back, or I was given the choice to come back, and I really, really struggled with it. This is interesting to me. And the third is that most, if not all, say they no longer fear death.
Okay. Wow, you nailed it. You've done your homework very,
Oh,
very
I
well.
love this stuff. I love it.
Very good. So, just looking at those three, love, absolutely. The majority of people we surveyed, we asked them if they encountered information or awareness about love during their near-death experience. And over in the narrative responses to that, just off the chart, unearthly love beyond anything they could have possibly known on earth. Additional powerful evidence that, given that the unearthly love they saw during their encounter, felt during the near-death experience, is beyond anything they knew on earth, really pulls away from the skeptic belief that this is a product of what they would have expected. I mean, you can't expect something that's unearthly in terms of its experience. Another thing you brought up there was that after effect of no longer fearing death. That's almost uniform. Again, from their perspective, they know what lies beyond death's door because they experienced it. They know that death is not to be feared, that in fact, there's a beautiful, wonderful afterlife for them and for all of us. So again, no surprise that they firmly believe that death, what lies beyond death's door, to them, it's not a mystery, it's known, and it's not anything to be afraid of. So that's another really key thing. And then the other thing you said is, in a very fascinating point that you observed, and you're right, the great majority of people during a near-death experience, if they're given a choice about whether to return to that physical earthly body that they knew for all their life, that's where their memories, their friends, family, loved ones, are all of their prior earthly existence. And yet, the afterlife environment that they're in, where their soul is in, they feel that overwhelming peace, that overwhelming love. They literally feel like that's their real home, these unearthly, beautiful, if you will, heavenly realms. So, not surprising, the majority of them, even though all that was previously familiar in their earthly life they're willing to stay in that unearthly realm. And I might add, when they share that with their friends, family, and loved ones, that that was their decision, their desire to stay in that heavenly realm, that can really be difficult for their, say, their spouses to understand. I
I'll
mean, like you,
bet.
oh, I mean, and yet that it's important to know that that's just how compelling that sense of connection, oneness, unity, love, and real home is in the afterlife. So that's again far beyond anything that you'd expect just from prior earthly existence. Again, another pop in the bubble of skeptic arguments that near-death experience is based on prior earthly expectations of what happens when you die.
You know, a very, very good friend of mine died on the table in a hospital years ago and told me this experience. And I said, I thought this must have been completely harrowing and life altering. And she said, really only the latter and in a good way. And she said the exact same thing. She said, I no longer fear death. And in fact, many of them come back with a renewed sense of purpose. They say they feel they have been sent back. Some of them want to stay and are told, you must go back. What you are meant to be doing on earth has not yet been accomplished.
That's absolutely true. Actually, these are called in our scholarly NDE, near-death experience research, after effects. These are the typically observed changes that occur following a near-death experience. Both retrospective and prospective studies document that these changes are often profound, lasting, and actually increase intensity throughout the remainder of the patient or person that had a near-death experience's life. I actually published the largest study of near-death experience after effects in scholarly peer-reviewed literature last year.
Mm.
At that time, we had 834 people that had a near-death experience, and we compared it to 42 people that had a life-threatening event but no near-death experience, both groups completing the same survey. The group that had the near-death experience was just literally orders of magnitude more expressing of these after effects that we all knew about, exactly like we were talking about earlier, dramatically reduced fear of death. Almost no one who's had a near-death experience fears death. Analogous to that, increased belief in an afterlife, increased belief in God, and interestingly, greatly increased, and I'm talking like orders of magnitude increased, self-identity of their level of compassion to
Mm,
themselves
yes.
being. So I'm sure you've seen that over and over. So that was our largest study quantifying what interestingly you picked up reading your near-death experiences and your investigation. And again, it's these after effects that we've been describing are so ingrained, so common that literally you read even a relatively limited number of near-death experiences, you just see that over and over and over again, those profound life changes after a near-death experience.
There were a couple on your website that really stood out to me. One was the woman who died on a rural road, and she reported seeing from above like a horse galloping like 2 miles away to find someone who would take the horse and go back and find her, which struck me as remarkable, just the length of what that observation must have been as far as we understand time. And secondly, you have memories of death experiences from babies,
Yeah.
who came back, grew into adults, and recounted in great detail, which were then corroborated by family members. Where is Western medicine on the whole in terms of accepting these or accepting them at least as a legitimate field of study?
Sure. In the 25 years I've been studying these, there's been a gratifying increase in the acceptance of near-death experience as real experiences, and for more doctors and scientists now than ever, acceptance of the fact that this really is an observation in near-death experiences of literally a soul departing the physical body and giving us a glimpse of what lies beyond. So it's nice. I mean, in the 25 years ago when I started this, I literally worked in secret because I was concerned about what the attitude
Wow.
of my doctor appeared. Yeah, I was Dr. Jeff on my website, completely secret. Once I published my New York Times best-selling book, boy, did I come out of the closet in a hurry. You can't keep my secret.
Good for you.
But it's been it just in 2021, for example, a major research firm, Pew Forum, which does surveys, asked people in the United States if they would endorse the statement that a near-death experience was an observation of an essence departing the physical body, which is a pretty good definition of near-death experience. That's a soul, what you and I would know, and I think most
Yep.
of your would. And 72% said yes. So there you go. You've got a majority, almost 3 out of 4 already in America, the public endorsing the reality of near-death experiences. And that's really propagating into healthcare field, especially nurses work more closely with patients, pick up
Yes.
there, and even doctors now. Doctors base their medical decisions, as I do, on science and evidence, and so the profound multiple lines of evidence for the reality of near-death experience really helps more doctors now than ever before embrace that and say, yeah, there really is more to what's going on in our body than just our physical brain, that there seems to be that immaterial soul, and as best we can tell, survives bodily death and goes on existing. And the soul, over and over, as long as we're talking about that, that soul is not something separate from your physical body. Importantly, it is retaining that personality of that person, the memories of that person's earthly life. It's literally who you are, everything you are, just free of the constraints of the physical body and going on into that beautiful afterlife.
Dr. Long, have you encountered people who have died and experienced the opposite, who have experienced what we on earth would consider some form of hell?
Sure. Um, that is about 2% of the near-death experiences I have. But again, since we're up to about 5,000, we have a fairly large series of those. So I've been able to study those and get some information. First and foremost, many people that have these experiences that contain hellish content, and it's just like classic hell. There can be demonic things, there can be frightening environments, frightening noises, smells, sounds, etc. When people have these, it's not at all unusual when they recover from that life-threatening event that they come to understand that that hellish near-death experience was literally, and they'll say this, they'll admit this, it was literally the only way for them to confront significant issues in their life, guilt, angers, resentments. And they will say, I needed that, if you will, spiritual kick in the pants to learn, grow, and become a better person. So that's not at all unusual. Another perspective on these hellish near-death experiences is while they do seem to be real, when they're described in near-death experiences, they are when they're observed remotely, these hellish realms are contained, if you will, constrained within these unearthly heavenly realms. So when people say in heaven, hell cannot exist, they are correct. The hellish realms seem to be very separate and apart from everywhere else in the beautiful heavenly realms. Another important point too is, as best I can tell, people really are not thrust there permanently and involuntarily. I really don't know of any major near-death experience researcher that is concerned or feels threatened that we have a permanent, irreversible, hellish existence to any of us that live our earthly life. So it seems that those beings are actually in hellish realms in near-death experiences, choosing to be there because of their malevolent, evil personality propagating even to the afterlife, even as souls in the afterlife. And so, paradoxically, to these malevolent, evil beings, being around other people in a walled off, if you will, segregated, hellish realm is literally to them heaven for them. It's what they chose, it's what they wanted, it's where they are most, I say at peace, but at least comfortable being around other beings that share their values of evil and malevolence. They just don't impact others in the heavenly realm, as best I can tell.
My final question, I think, would be there are some people for whom the idea of eternal life sounds like their version of hell. The idea that, there's a philosophy, a philosophical belief that holds what gives life meaning is its impermanence, that we are here for so very briefly, and that's the entire point. And that if we were to live forever, meaning would be lost, whether on this plane or the next. Where does the field go? Let's say at some point in the near future, modern medicine, Western medicine determines or comes to an understanding that there is such a thing as existence after the earthly plane. would the next field of study be, how long does the soul exist in said afterworld? There seems to be this baked in inherent belief that, well, then you're living forever. Nobody ever dies. But can that, whatever that non-human form be, can that eventually dissipate? Where do we go? Where do we go in this field?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's where it helps to have studied, 5,000 near-death experiences. The soul is a non-physical aspect of us that enters into that beautiful unearthly realm. In the literal thousands of descriptions I've heard of this afterlife heavenly realm, I have not once heard any being describing that in a near-death experience come away with the concept that our soul existence in heaven in this unearthly realm is anything less than eternal. Not once, and that's out of thousands. So, as best we can tell, based on that very significant body of evidence, we really do have that permanent afterlife, and it's in a beautiful realm. Now, don't forget, as we mentioned earlier, the dominant, if you will, mood feeling, what people say over and over is that sense of unearthly love. So, in that unearthly love envelopment, we are not only who we are, everything we are, but far more that we could be in our earthly life. In fact, it's another interesting point. Again, out of thousands of descriptions in the afterlife, I have not heard a single one describe encountering other beings that were concerned that existence in that afterlife, eternal as it appears to be, was less than meaningful, that there wasn't any existence, conscious continuance of life as broadly defined in the afterlife, which was anything less than entirely meaningful, purposely, and filled with love.
Well, I think that's a lovely place to leave it. Thank you so much. We so appreciate you, Dr. Long, for coming on the show and sharing your research and your thoughts. And I think it's just a perfect All Souls Day conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great discussion here. Thank you very much.
And that's it for our mini nerve and our week of paranormal, supernatural, unexplained spiritualism. That does it. We will be back here on Tuesday with a full nerve and again on Wednesday for the nerve at night. And a friendly reminder to check out the Nerves Substack at thenerveshow.substack.com if you want to see all the behind the scenes stuff that went on this week and recommendations. And, it's a party over there. Go sign up. And thank you guys. Thank you for that and for joining our All Souls edition of The Nerve. We will see you back here Tuesday at The Nerve, where you will never guess what we're about to say next. Are you accidentally turning healthy fruits into unhealthy ones? It's more common than you might think. While fruit can be great for digestion, reducing bloating, even supporting weight loss, many Americans make one major mistake that cancels out those benefits, because some fruits may actually harm your energy levels and digestion. World-renowned heart surgeon Dr. Stephen Gundry created a video discussing 3 fruits to avoid, and it will shock you. Watch it now at thehealthyfat.com/nerve. That's thehealthyfat.com/nerve, or go to the video link in the description below. Dr. Gundry lost 70 pounds and has kept it off for over 20 years using this approach. His digestive issues are gone. He says he feels better than he did in his 40s. More than 20 million people have watched his free presentation. Don't miss it. He explains exactly what to avoid and what to eat instead. Watch now at thehealthyfat.com/nerve or click the link below. It could change the way you eat and feel forever.